Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. I am Cesar Delgado. I am your host for today's program. We were talking about the harvest season in Northwest Iowa with Kelly Garrett in Northwest Iowa. We know that they have a special occasion circumstances of the flooding for this year. Welcoming him to the show. We were talking about the dairy industry at the National Milk Producers Federation with Alan Bjarne. He is with the National Milk Producers Federation. We were talking about milk industry, and I will be asking him about dairy margin program in the Farm Bill and export to Colombia. Lastly, we were discussing about the commodities markets with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. This is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold. The Illinois Department of Nature and Resources that they registered for deers were died because of the drought for this fall in the state of Illinois. However, the Department of Nature and Resources that if you are looking for deers to hunting is limited. Illinois Farm Bureau is going to be appliances to the court. Illinois Farm Bureau was suspended from the American Farm Bureau Federation for country financial insurance. It's lose their memberships because of the non-farmers members have country financial insurance. Iowa Farm Bureau are considered to change the insurance policy to the non-farmers members. Finally, Illinois Chemical and Fertilizer Association will be held for annual event in Peoria Civil Center for January 18th-19th in Peoria. We are back with Kelly Garrett in Northwest Iowa. Stay tuned for more on Back Roads of Illinois. We were talking about the harvest season in Northwest Iowa with Kelly Garrett in Northwest Iowa. We know that they have a special occasion circumstances of the flooding for this year. Welcome to the show, Kelly. How is everything with your family in the harvest?
Harvest this year was really nice. You know, we had some above average yields. We are in the hills in western Iowa, so the flooding was just a little bit to the north of us. But we didn't experience any flooding. But you know, with the big rains that we all had, we did have some ditches and things like that. So the harvest was good. You know, it was very dry. The crop came out very quickly. My family is doing very well. My oldest son announced at Thanksgiving that I'm going to be a grandfather for the first time. You know, no better news than that. A week later, my youngest son proposed to his girlfriend, so I'm going to be a father-in-law again. My family's doing very, very well, and becoming a grandfather, as you can see, my family's growing.
Can you tell us what is the yields for corn? Congratulations.
Yes. You know, overall, this year we had around 5,000 acres of corn, and the overall yield was 215 over every acre. We did have two nice entries into the NCGA contest, yield contest that we're proud of. We won the no-till irrigated division of Iowa with a 335 bushel entry. And even more exciting than that, we won what they call Class J. And Class J is the low nitrogen category. We won the nation at 324 bushel per acre there. Class J is very interesting. We're very proud of that because of the way that we farm, trying to farm sustainably or regeneratively. As I say, I try to work in tune with Mother Nature. And so, Class J with low nitrogen, you have to be below 180 pounds of nitrogen. And we came in at like 151 pounds. So 324 bushel corn at 151 pounds of nitrogen is very exciting for us because what we try to accomplish from an ROI perspective, and again, working in tune with Mother Nature.
Great to hear that. It's not bad at all. Kelly, we were talking about the harvest season, and let's talk about the hardships with the flooding for this year. Could you tell our audience about that little more about this spring?
The rains that we had this spring and things like that caused some erosion in many areas. Being no-till, no-till and cover crops, we were able to withstand that fairly well. But there was a few big ditches that we had to fix. You know what I mean? That's just from the nature of coming in the hills. The flooding didn't really affect us because of the elevation changes we have in the hills, things like that. It's just erosion control is really what we center around.
What was the weather for this summer?
The rain was really nice. It wasn't terribly hot until the second half of the summer, and then it did warm up. And I think we maybe did lose a few bushel to the late season dryness and heat that came. But the way that the weather is, well, I think that probably happens every year. But all in all, it was a really nice crop.
How about the planting season and growing season?
Planting season, I was very nervous about because it was wet, and I probably damaged the yield potential in a couple fields because I felt like it was getting late, and and then the forecast was wet coming, and so I probably planted a day too soon in a couple fields, and looking back, that was a mistake I made. Next time I won't do that. I will wait. We cannot push the planting date like we did before.
Yes.
The best yield that we had, like I said, the best contest entry that we had was 335 bushel in the no-till irrigated class. Over every acre, the corn made 215, which is our APH. And I had hoped that it would be above average, but I think that late season heat took some off, and then we're pretty much 100% corn now. We will be next year. This year we did have some beans. That rotated corn really showed an advantage over the corn on corn, but soybeans just have a hard time showing us any positive return. And so we go more and more corn all the time because there is an ROI. And so that probably takes a little yield off. Agronomically speaking, a rotation is the best way to go. Financially speaking, corn makes us money and soybeans don't.
Kelly, we were discussing about the commodities markets. It is tight for right now. However, what is your take on the commodity prices for right now?
Well, they're pretty low. We did have some opportunities last summer to market the grain, things like that. And so my grain for 24 is pretty much all sold and a portion of 25. I really think a producer needs to look at forward contracting. They need to look at utilizing a hedging account for what the hedging account was intended for, not speculating, but hedging. And I I feel bad for those producers that have unsold grain in the bins, but when there's an opportunity to take risk off the table, we really need to look at doing that 1 and even 2 years ahead of time.
What is the cash markets in your area in Northwest Iowa?
Oh, there would be $4 or just a little higher than that.
Is there anything else that would you like to tell the farmers in the flooding situation in Iowa, Minnesota?
I would say that I feel bad for the struggles and hardships that you went through this year, and next year will be a better year.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap of our conversation about the commodities markets, the harvest season in Northwest Iowa?
I would just like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. I would like to tell them to check out extremeag.farm and also check out glcbeef.com.
Thanks, Kelly. I enjoyed our conversation. Merry Christmas and New Year to you and your family.
Thank you, Caesar. Merry Christmas.
This is Kelly Garrett from Northwest Iowa on back roads of Illinois. This is your open numbers of trade by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. Corn futures are up at 4 to 5 cents. Soybean futures are up for January beans at 4 to 10 cents. Wheat futures are up for March wheat futures at 3 to 5 cents. Let's go with livestock markets for today's opening for this morning. Cattle futures are down at 5 to 4 cents. Feeder cattle are down at 5 to 4 cents, bring down the nickel. Lean hogs are down at 6 to 5 cents. Crude oil are up to 5 to 10 cents per barrel. Dow Jones is up to 8 points. We were going to have a conversation about the milk and margin program in the dairy industry with Alan Bjarne from National Milk Producers Federation. We were welcoming him to the show. How are you today?
Good. Holiday season. Folks are pretty busy.
Let's begin with our discussion on the dairy margin program in the dairy industry. Could you tell our listeners how are implemented by this program?
Sure. So the Dairy Margin Coverage Program is the main safety net for U.S. dairy farmers under federal legislation. It was first created, the forerunner to this program was created in the 2014 Farm Bill. It was called the Margin Protection Program. And the concept behind it is a little bit different than what you see with traditional commodity price support systems. Rather than have, say, a set target price for milk, the Dairy Margin Coverage Program works more like an insurance program where a dairy farmer pays for coverage up to a certain margin, which is defined as a price of milk minus the feed costs, which is the biggest expense for production. So the Dairy Margin Coverage Program basically protects you from really tight margins that allows you to, that makes it impossible for you to meet your budget. Now, this program in the 2014 Farm Bill, frankly, when it was first implemented, didn't work very well. The coverage levels really weren't adequate to give dairy farmers the protection they needed. So in the 2018 Farm Bill, the current Dairy Margin Production Program, Dairy Margin Coverage Program was created. That basically gave better production and coverage for farmers, and basically has helped, farmers maintain that margin that helps them keep in business. Now, one of the areas of it is to keep payments lower. It's capped at a certain size of farm. Basically, the coverage that you can purchase up to a certain number of cows, what's called tier one coverage, only goes up to your first 5 million pounds of milk production. This is a dairy farm of about 200 and 225 cows, which works pretty well for smaller farms. Larger farms don't benefit as much from this coverage, and as dairy farms have consolidated and gotten larger, a lot of larger farms rely on other risk management programs to help them with their coverage. But it has been useful in tougher times. We saw some fairly large payouts over the last couple of years because of low margins for dairy producers. This last year, especially these last few months, you've seen better milk prices, and during those times, this program doesn't pay out, which is the idea of a government support, right? It helps farmers during more difficult times. So in that way, DMC has been a lot more useful for dairy farmers than its predecessor program was. We're not really looking for a lot of changes to it in the upcoming Farm Bill, but it is a useful tool as far as risk management for dairy producers, and it's one that we certainly would like to see continued.
How about the insurance coverage for the dairy industry, Alan?
Well, along with the dairy margin coverage program, which is very effective with smaller farmers, and also includes coverage levels for larger farmers as well. There have been times when margins have fallen to the point where for larger producers, the coverage does start to become meaningful. So I don't want to just completely write it off for larger producers. But, they also have programs like the Dairy Revenue Protection Program, Livestock Gross Margin Program. These, again, were programs that were difficult for larger farmers to really make meaningful until the 2018 Farm Bill. And the National Milk Producers Federation has supported those programs as well. Again, to deal with any sort of a risk management portfolio, you need different tools. And some tools work better for smaller farmers, some work for larger farmers. National Milk Producers Federation is trying to support farms of all sizes, all regions of the country. We're working for the most effective federal safety net. We find that variety of programs that better meet the needs of dairy farmers at different levels and different regions of different sizes is what's been most effective for covering the industry.
Alan, are you watching on the bird flu outbreak to the dairy herd?
Well, we've seen in recent months, it's been a big concern for the industry. And when it was first announced in March, this wasn't something that we went into 2024 thinking we were going to be dealing with. It turned into a very big part of the year. And, the challenge throughout has been for, farmers who care a lot about their animals to manage what is an animal health issue, making sure that we have a federal response that is appropriate to the risks that it poses for animal health and potentially to human health, while at the same time reassuring consumers that, their milk is safe. Pasteurization has been found to inactivate the H5N1 virus in dairy cattle. We have seen, some of the measures that have been taken place in terms of animal movement and testing have been effective in terms of getting to better understand the cause and spread of this virus. We're very thankful that we haven't seen it mutating in dairy cattle, which is a little bit of reassurance that this is a containable problem. But at the same time, you have ongoing issues with animal health and of course with worker health. We have seen a new risk introduced to the dairy workplace that you have to take very seriously because you don't want your workers getting sick. So it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge we've been managing through. I think a lot of components of the response have been managed quite well, but we're not out of the woods yet. You've seen federal new requirements coming in terms of bulk milk tank testing programs to try to figure out where sources are and what spreads are and what controls need to be taken place. This is a big lesson in the importance of biosecurity for the industry, but I think the industry is listening to it. I think we're getting better, and I think we're doing what we can to get through it.
What plans for biosecurity for the dairy industry?
Well, when you take a look at the National Dairy Farm Program, you take a look at our biosecurity initiatives. Taking a look at what are practical applications for personal protective equipment in the workplace. To make sure that we don't see cases among workers. A lot of lessons learned from the poultry industry, which has been dealing with this for some time in terms of biosecurity on farms, making sure that things are washed, making sure that person-to-person contact is minimized, making sure that we're good citizens when we're bordering poultry operations, where some of the effects of H5N1 in their flocks can be a lot more than it is for a dairy farm. A lot of steps that are being taken, a lot of important steps, and a lot of steps that are figuring out as you go along. Again, we're managing through it. We'd like to be through it. We're doing what we can to get there.
Do you have some concerns about the extension of the Farm Bill into 2026?
Right now, a lot of plans are being bandied around Capitol Hill. Before I went to National Milk Producers Federation, I was a reporter. And I have been following, some way engaged with every farm bill since 2002. Sometimes they expire, sometimes they are extended immediately, sometimes that expiration lasts for a few months, but I have yet to see it not work out. So I got to say, I'm not concerned about there simply not being any extension and some of these doomsday scenarios for farm policy that get bandied about actually happening. Can I today just sit here and say I know exactly what date the Farm Bill will be extended to date and every detail of exactly how it will look? No, that's what Capitol Hill people are arguing about right now. But we're going to get it through. And what we get through will be something that, from a dairy policy standpoint, is I think at the least going to keep the progress that we've made and potentially has some promise for us moving ahead.
Do you have any final thoughts on the bird flu outbreak and the SNAP program?
Those are two separate things, but I'll give you a couple thoughts. On bird flu, would we like this to have burned itself through the dairy herds at this point? Of course. But again, one thing that has been cause for some optimism is that the strain does not seem to be mutating or evolving in dairy cattle. You're starting to see additional cases in poultry. These are the birds flying overhead, and this has become a perpetual thing in poultry because we haven't seen new cases in dairy from any sort of a new strain that makes you think that if we can just get through this old strain, perhaps this was a one-off and we may not be dealing with perpetual bird flu in dairy. You just don't know. I mean, information can change from day to day, but that has been encouraging. As far as the SNAP program, one thing that I would just like to keep in mind in that is this is a highly emotional, highly political issue, becomes very partisan between Democrats and the Republicans. When they are arguing about things dealing with the SNAP program, they can cost single billions of dollars, but the SNAP program is more than $100 billion a year. The fundamental structure of this program is not threatened. And the importance of it to agriculture as a conduit for affordable food for the people who most need it isn't going to fundamentally change. There'll be a lot of discussion about very specific things, and I don't want to minimize them because they affect people and consumers. But from the standpoint of agriculture, these are consumers that we're going to continue to serve. The vast majority of this program is going to go on very similarly to how it has, and we're going to continue to be ready to meet that need. So from a farm standpoint, SNAP is something that you watch. We are a supporter of the program. But getting pulled into the partisan politics of it all will only take you so far. This is something, but from an agricultural standpoint, we support. It's solid. Something's going to get done.
Thanks, Alan.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Alan. You
Good
have a
speaking.
great Christmas.
You as well.
This is Alan Bjarne from National Milk Producers Federation on Back Roads of Illinois. We were discussing about the commodities markets with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. We were talking about the commodities markets with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. We were watching the markets for today's close. Here's Tyler. How are things in North Dakota? And welcome to the show.
Things are good up here, Caesar. It's been a little cold, a little windy today. Had a little bit of snow, but that's to be expected when you live in extreme western North Dakota. So far, it's actually been a pretty decent winter. We've had a couple short bouts of cold, a couple days with some snow, but for the most part, you can still see the ground. So we could use some moisture. Kind of came out of the summer into the fall, a little bit on the dry side. So surprisingly, I don't think most people would be too upset if we got a big snowfall. So um, as far as the markets closing today, we had kind of a good day in corn. March corn closed up 3 cents, kind of a dead cat bounce after the sell-off last Thursday and Friday. Your new crop December 25 corn ended up about a penny and a quarter. Beans kind of struggling today. January beans down 6 1/4. Your new crop beans down 7 1/2. Seeing some struggles. Actually seeing good weather and some good forecasts for Brazil and Argentina. So kind of looks like that South American crop is going to continue good pace and good growing conditions, and we expect to see a fairly sizable crop out of that. I know you got some questions coming up on South America, so we'll kind of leave it at that. And then wheat was a little bit mixed. Started the day off strong in the wheat markets. Some news that there was a big sale, uh, and also some news out of Russia that they're seeing some lower export numbers. And we were up pretty strong at one point, but kind of gave most of that back. And Chicago closed down a couple cents. You've got your Kansas City up 2 1/4, and Minneapolis up about 2 cents on the day.
What is the temperature in North Dakota? Illinois, it's 50 degrees.
So today I think the high is probably about 28. I actually haven't even been outside, so we've got a decent day today. But last week we rarely got much over 10, 15 degrees. So 20, 30 here in December and January is always welcomed. It beats 20 below.
Let's begin with our discussion on the commodity markets for today's close. How are things with January beans?
January beans have been struggling. You know, we were down 6 1/4 today, closed at 982. Kind of broke down through what I would have said was a short-term uptrend that began the week before Thanksgiving. Kind of felt like we needed to hold support where we settled last Friday. Last Friday we settled at about 982. Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong chart there. 988, and it would have been kind of where we wanted to hold, and we weren't able to do that. Broke down below that today and pegged down at 982. I'm not going to say that it's the end of the world for soybeans. We've actually been lower while we've kind of had this little uptrend, but that had been kind of short-term support. So I would expect now support to be, 6, 7 cents lower, that 975 range. We're going to really need to hold that on January beans if we, expect to see this market push higher. But right now, it's just kind of a lack of news.
Corn on this afternoon.
Say that again.
How been the March corn on this afternoon?
March corn closed up 3 cents at 445. Kind of in the middle of a trading range. Again, not a lot of news in the corn market outside of decent weather in Brazil. More than just the numbers that that play a role here. We got pretty high long positions by managed money across all the animal proteins. And the one thing I would say in all of this is the good thing is demand has stayed high. So we're evidently doing a good job. We've got a lot of people out there eating beef, eating pork. That's a good thing. But I still, boy, if I'm paying that kind of money to get my hands on anywhere from a 4-weight to an 8-weight steer right now, and I'm betting that markets are going to be considerably higher in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I definitely am willing to pay a little bit of premium to protect the bottom side.
What do you recommend for the premium for cattle markets?
That's a tough question. But what I look at is whether I'm buying a put option or I'm buying LRP. So if I'm buying a put option, I'm going to look at the coverage price, and then I'm going to subtract the premium that I got to pay. And for most cases, I want to see that end number. So whatever my strike price on the put less the premium, or my coverage price on the LRP minus the premium. If I can get a worst case scenario at 250, I'm going to go ahead and do it all day long. It's going to be harder today, being down a buck and a half. Early last week, you could get it done, but 250 has kind of been my number, and I'll tell you where I come up with that. We struggle, we haven't spent a lot of time on the feeder calf index above 250. And if you recall, the feeder calf index is an average of what an 800-pound steer is bringing from North Dakota and Montana south to Texas and New Mexico in that 12-state region. And we've been over 250. We've been over 250 a handful of times this year. But in the calendar year 2024 so far, I think we've only been above 250 on the index 30-some% of the time. And since we first went over 250 almost 18 months ago, we've only spent 18% of the time over 250. So I'm going to take my gamble and say if I got a 250 guarantee, if this cash market breaks, I'm going to get a payment either on my put or my LRP, and I'm protected there. So that's kind of the level I'm looking at protecting right at this moment.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap of our conversation about updating on the Brazilian planting season and the wheat planting season in Northern Plains?
My final thoughts are if you haven't done anything on new crop beans, we're staring at a big crop coming out of Brazil right now. All signs point to a large crop. We still got the North American growing season this spring. But I sure wouldn't be afraid before we know that it's a big crop out of Brazil. There's still there's still a chance this thing could turn the other way. But once we feel confident that we're going to get that big 170 million metric ton crop, I get a little bit more nervous about where prices go from there. So if you haven't done anything yet, there's still opportunity. There's still put options out there you can buy, set a floor under this thing. Wheat market, it right now it looks good. We got a long time where I don't want to say there's no news, but you've got the winter wheat in dormancy, so weather becomes less of an issue for the next few months. So
Thanks, Tyler.
you bet. Good to visit with you, Caesar.
This is Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net on Back Road of Illinois. March feeder cattle minus 1.300, closing at $256.375. February live cattle minus 2.050, closing at $189.975. February lean hogs minus 2.050, closing at $183.550. March corn plus 3 single quote 0, closing at $4.45 single quote 0. March soybeans minus 9 single quote 0, closing at $9.86 single quote 4. March Chicago wheat -2 single quote 2 closing at $5.50 single quote 0. March KC wheat +2 single quote 2 closing at $5.59 single quote 2. Closing quotes provided by Kyle R. Bumstead Branch Office Manager Erickson, Nebraska 308-708-7340. Important dates to remember. Thanks to our friends from Allendale Inc. Thanks to all of our guests for today's program. We're running a lot of time, but you can listen to our show on YouTube and whenever you get your podcast. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. Have a good day.